Hello and welcome to the India Development Debate right here on ET Now. I'm Supriya Srinath and with me is my colleague Sandeep Gurumurthy. It really is politics over economics as Finance Minister Arun Jaitley rises to present Budget 2018 come tomorrow morning. For one, being the last full year budget under the current government, this is one opportunity that Jaitley would not like to miss for wooing the rural constituency. Many believe that despite the fault lines on the fiscal front, Jaitley will attempt a dream budget loaded with incentives for the middle class and also India's hinterland.
It's going to be a tightrope walk for the finance minister given the limited headroom he has. Revenue collections are not quite matching up to the projection at a time when high crude oil prices and a revival in the global economy that are likely to weigh heavy on the external front. Another big concern is the slow pace of job creation, which the opposition is latching on to hit out at the government. So will it be an election budget with Jaitley loosening his purse strings to keep the voters happy, or will he stick to the path of fiscal consolidation? Election budget 2018, that's what we're discussing tonight on the India Development Debate. And joining us on this special edition of India Development Debate is a power-packed panel. We've got GVL Narasimha Rao of the BJP, MV Rajiv Gowda of the Congress, Sadanand Dume, a columnist of American Enterprise Institute, and we've resident fellow, in fact, of American Enterprise Institute, and Swaminathan Iyer, consulting editor of ET Now on the politics of Budget 2018. Swami, let me start with you. Simple question, is this going to be an election budget?
It is an election budget. It is the last budget before the next election. So by that definition, it's an election budget. If you're asking, is it going to be a freebie budget? That's a slightly different kind of question. At Davos, Modi suggested that freebies are not the way forward. And yet it's very clear from the BJP's track record that freebies are not off the agenda either. You'll remember in the case of the last UP election, they offered a full loan waiver for all farm loans. In the case of the Gujarat election, they offered interest-free loans to all farmers. So, will there be some gestures made in this budget? Without doubt. But I suspect that they will take the form of various spending programs for the various different places. I think definitely something will be done for farmers. It may be like interest-free loans as happened in Gujarat. There are some people who say you should follow the Telangana model, where KCR has announced a flat grant to all farmers, saying that, regardless of whether you borrowed or not borrowed, whether you're using it or not, there's a flat amount to every single person. And if this kind of approach is affordable for the Telangana government, it should be affordable for the central government too. So I expect that definitely something like this would be done for farmers. Some kind of schemes will be announced for employment, because that's a serious area where Modi has to worry that he has not kept up to election promises. So definitely employment, and definitely in agriculture, I would expect to see something. Over and above that, I would expect to see, for a wide variety of different interests, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. Mostly in the form of spending programs, not so much in the form of various kinds of tax fiddles. Because on that, frankly, the scope for fiddling things is quite limited, given that the indirect taxes are fixed by the GST. On the direct taxes, I think we should see a continuation of the reduction of corporate tax rates, getting down towards ASEAN rates. I wouldn't expect very much change in the income tax direct rates, although again, with a view to the elections, perhaps the income tax threshold may be raised a little. So as I said, I expect a lot of little moves, little marginal moves, to try and say that, well, whether you like it or not, this is an election budget. We don't want to give away the house, but we do want to keep people happy. I think that will be the approach as far as the political economy of the budget is concerned.
So the underlying line there really is jobs and agrarian mess, and you don't want to give away the house, but you want to make people happy. Sadanand Dume, in the last 4 budgets, Mr. Jaitley has been able to resist the apparent populism. 6 assembly elections, the general election in 2019, do you believe he can continue to resist the temptation to go completely populist?
I think there's going to be, I think what they're going to try and do is, is finesse it. I think the optics are important enough for them that they're not going to have a complete blowout, right? So they're not going to simply toss the fiscal deficit target away. So there may be some relaxing of it. But what will be interesting to watch is what they actually maintain. And my own prediction is that they will, in the budget, present perhaps a reasonable easing of the fiscal deficit. But in reality, they will overshoot it because in the end, this is an election year and winning the election matters most to them.
Okay, so you're saying this is an election year and winning the election probably matters most to them. Let's hit straight to some of the key contentious issues in the build up to this budget, and of course agrarian stress. And it's sort of now a no-brainer that the disproportionate focus of the budget is likely to be on the rural sector. We've seen the economic survey point out that farm incomes have grown at just 1% over the last 4 years. A whole host of reasons are for that, including 2 years of bad monsoon. But Rajiv Gowda, what is the UPA's suggestion? Will the UPA recommend what it did when it was faced with a similar situation at the end of the first term of the UPA government? And would the UPA recommend that let's go in for another massive farm loan waiver program? 60,000 crores is what Chidambaram's farm loan waiver was at the end of UPA term 1. Is that what you think the NDA should go as well? Are we, is that the route we need to walk down?
I think this is Mr. Jaitley's call. We are just watching and seeing the government hurtle from one mistake to another and demonstrate their lack of care, lack of concern for the agricultural sector. Well, I do not think that the government would actually go ahead with a farm loan waiver. Mr. Modi has been resolutely against it right from the beginning, but even though some state governments have actually gone in that direction. What can happen, of course, is to find ways to improve farm incomes. And that, there are a variety of methods. One, pay attention to your imports. Why are you bringing in competitive imports at a time when there is a glut in the market? So the end result after a good crop is that farmers actually end up with much lower incomes. So that's one problem. Another problem has to do with fertilizer subsidies and who they reach and whether those kinds of input costs are being addressed at all. There are numerous other issues with regard to the electronic national marketplace. Has that been implemented in the appropriate manner? So basically, what you would see is more headline management, more the standard story about we're going to double farmers' income in 2095 or whatever the new target will be. But the basic point is that this government, if you look at opinion surveys, you see that the rural sector has long ago given up hope that this government is going to do anything for it. And those of us who are observing what the government is, is indulging in the larger agricultural domain, we do not see even investments that would change the game going forward. The various schemes, the irrigation schemes, etc., have not achieved the kinds of goals that they should have achieved. And so, you still have talk about soil health cards and things of that sort. But even the infrastructure that's needed to make those intelligent investments work, those are not there. Right? So essentially, while it's not as if we don't understand that even agriculture has a knowledge economy aspect to it. There are so many other interventions that need to come in. We need to address input costs, we need to address prices, we need to address MSPs, but I do not anticipate that this government has figured this out. It just seems quite callous when it comes to the agricultural sector.
Mr. Gowda, those are your opening remarks, but I'm glad you've spoken about agriculture because that's the question I'm going to put forward to GVL Narasimha Rao, who joins us live right here on the India Development Debate. And GVL, the economic survey yesterday very categorically pointed out that farm incomes have grown by just 1% in the last 4 years. Given this reality and given the rural stress that one is witnessing on India's farms, is it safe to presume that this will be a budget for Bharat?
I think all our budgets have been for India, for Bharat, and there has been no inclusive government like that of Prime Minister Modi ji in the last several decades. For the first time, challenges that ought to have been addressed in the 50s, 60s and 70s when the Congress continuously was in power are being addressed now. You have 16 crore people who have been given social security for the first time after this government came into office. You have 4 crore toilets being built, 4 crore households being given power connection for the first time, 5 crore women being given cooking gas connection for the first time. I think I think the Congress must introspect. What were they doing for 7 decades? It is, if headline management was a priority, it was for Mr. Chidambaram. It was for the Congress party's finance ministers who were always focused on the pink newspapers and the kind of headlines they can get from there. This government and this Prime Minister are focused on building new India. We have been addressing the challenges that really ought to have been addressed many years ago. Okay. Farm sector has certainly not done well in the last 3-4 years. It's because 2 years of consecutive drought. And there has also been international fall of prices of food grains and various agricultural commodities, which certainly had its own impact on domestic agriculture. But if you take the kind of crop insurance scheme that was implemented, 6 crore people being covered under this, I think there are certain implementation issues. But this is a sort of a boon for the farmers, and going forward with greater coverage, certainly this is going to really help give income security to the farmers.
Sure. Okay. Swami, I take that point on board, GVL, but Swami, important to mention that would you concede that politically, in some ways, the government is on some sort of a sticky wicket? Because on the one hand, you've seen rural stress that is sort of now evident, and the other hand, you have private investment which is showing no signs of revival. For 6 consecutive years, it's not a UPA NDA issue. It's not happened for 6 consecutive years. No finance minister, no budget has managed to turn around the private investment cycle. So you have lack of private investment and you've got stress in the agriculture sector. Politically, do you think the government is on a sticky wicket, or do you think it's not such a big political issue?
No, the government is going to have a bash. Whether it will succeed or not, we don't know. But, you know, every sector is important, including this one. Agriculture is important, employment is employment, all of these is important. Things haven't done very well, but one more scheme will be produced. What that scheme is going to be, I don't know. But I'm sure there will be some scheme with a large, elaborate name and a significant amount of money, and perhaps the banks will be used to help to fund it.
All right, Sadanand, I'll come to you. 6 years on, and it's not just under the Modi government, it's been 6 years that private investment has been stalled in this country. The last reading of the private investment is 24.4% of the GDP, which is very, very dismal. It's down from levels of 34.4% and things like that, and not such a recent past. What is it that Budget 2018 can realistically do to give that flywheel to private investment in the green field, in the fresh projects, really?
You know, this is, you know, along with the failure to create jobs, I would say this is the single biggest failure of this government on the economic front. My own sense is that they are not going to do anything to revive animal spirits. They really had an opportunity to do this when they came in 2014 amidst great hope. Part of the problem really has been the twin bank balance sheet problem, which is really something they inherited. So we don't have to blame them for that. But part of this is of their own creation. I mean, the fact is that, you know, they had said that they would roll back tax terrorism. In fact, they increased tax terrorism. The fact is that they have treated business with a great deal of suspicion. You had the disruption of demonetization, followed by somewhat badly designed GST. And so you really can't blame Indian business for not really wanting to jump in and invest. At this stage of the game, maybe they could actually go through with the corporate tax cuts, which Mr. Jaitley promised several years ago and has not gone through with. That may be helpful. If they could do something dramatic to show that India was headed towards a more stable approach towards taxation, less harassment and so on. But I've seen nothing in this government over the last 4 years that suggests that this is the way that they are headed. I would not be surprised if we see something, you know, prompted by the Trump tax cuts in the United States, some kind of lower taxes to make Indian companies somewhat more competitive. That they could do, it would be helpful. But I don't see them really going back and making the revival of animal spirits of private Indian industry central to their budget in the final year. I think this was a missed opportunity, really.
It's a missed opportunity. GVL, only fair that you respond, because what Sadanand is saying is that yes, you inherited the twin balance sheet problem for which UPA deserves much of the blame, especially the NPA crisis was the doing of the UPA regime. But yet you have done precious little in 4 years of being in power to revive the animal spirits of private industry, which is why it's too late to expect anything to happen on that front.
Would someone explain to me, when ease of doing business ranking goes up by 40, 35, 36 points in a space of 3-4 years, has it become easier to do business in India? Has it become tough? Has the cost of capital gone down in the last 3-4 years? Has it gone up? When have the FDI inflows tremendously increased in the last 4 years? When the whole world looks at India as the right place to invest, why would Indian companies not look at this? Is it not something that the Indian industry also needs to look within and answer this question? Is there a culture change? Do you want us to really perpetrate the same kind of scams that the previous government created to create those animal spirits that you're talking about? Let people come and loot and give away public assets free? Is that the kind of animal spirits that you're referring to? This government has ensured there has to be a culture of doing business. Certainly, some things, the manner in which business was carried out in the past, maybe there is some kind of a culture change. But people have to get used to it. This will benefit us both in the medium and long term.
Okay, GVL, Swami, Rajiv Gowda, I'm coming to you, but I want to get Swami's reaction to this, because GVL, this gets thrown at us a lot, that people say that one of the reasons why we haven't seen revival of private investment, partly because of the stress in the banking sector, and partly because way of doing business in India has changed, that there is a new normal, that there has been a sort of quote-unquote cleansing of the economy, and as a result, in the medium term or the near term, we've seen lack of private investment. The sort of, crony capitalists who got away in the past can't do so anymore. Do you buy this argument? Do you think that's a valid excuse for why we haven't seen private capital, investment?
Don't give a value judgment.
Swami, your take.
No, please. The notion that crony capitalism is the only way to get investment going is just wrong. In fact, when crony capitalism flourishes, those other than a few cronies say, why should I invest? So crony capitalism is most certainly not a way of accelerating investment. I have a completely different explanation. People are not investing because the totality of domestic and export demand is not as much as they were used to in the past. And the reason is not that the domestic demand has collapsed, but the export demand collapsed. We are still below the export level of 2013, 2014. We are that far below. So when such an important chunk of demand has gone away, we have not been able to get it. People say, why should I keep investing? I am running at 70-75% capacity. There is no hurry in accelerating investment. You will not therefore get a boom in investment until there is a revival of export demand. On that, there are some favorable signs. The whole world economy this year is getting into a coordinated upsurge. America, Europe, Japan are all together doing well for the first time. The IMF has raised upwards its predictions and projections for the world. In these circumstances, I think it is possible that Indian exports will finally start growing at 15 to 20% against a stagnation in the previous years. If that happens, if export demand revives, then I can see people saying, well, total demand has gone up, now I will invest. But if you think that in the absence of an export boom, people are going to invest very large sums of money, the answer is simply no. Domestic demand by itself is not enough to produce an investment boom. You need increasing domestic demand and foreign demand. Of course, then the next question is, why is the foreign demand not been there? Part of the reason was in the first 2 years of the Modi government, the world economy itself was somewhat shaky and world trade was not doing well. Last year we had this problem, the problems not only of the twin balance sheet, but demonetization, the GST glitches, various things coming in the way. Over and above that, the problem is that many of our laws, like for instance the land acquisition law, have gone towards making land expensive. Our interest rates are relatively high. Our labor rates compared with Bangladesh or some of the other labor intensive countries are high. So if we have got into a stage where through various legislations of various different parties, not just Modi, not just UPA, if we make land, labor and capital expensive, there is a problem in making exports boom. So we need to have new measures to try and bring the costs of these down, improve the logistic costs, improve other costs. There at least, with GST, if you are able to knock out various checkposts and bring down the cost of transportation and warehousing, that would be a positive thing. But we must make Indian exports competitive again. Once Indian exports are competitive and exports take off, the totality of demand will boom, animal spirits will return in a much bigger way, and then we will see a really big revival of the economy on a sustainable basis.
Gaura, if I were to ask you to leave aside your partisan hat for a moment and talk to us just as an economist and a trained economist at that, will you agree with Swami that, while we blame the Modi government for not being able to create the jobs, and we're going to touch upon that next in more detail, the fact that investments are not happening is a function of capacity utilization, is a function of low demand, both domestically and overseas. Will you cut them slack at least on this point in time?
Actually, I cannot. If you actually look at the performance of the Modi government, it is a case of a wasted mandate. They came into power without the other political obstructions which make policy making difficult, coalition governments and things of that sort. They came in with a historic mandate. He promised the moon to the people, and at the end, what did we see? A rising economy was pushed down. And you saw demonetization, and you saw the improper implementation of GST, and so you started to see new troughs in terms of the economic growth. When the economy plunges, not because of some natural business cycle, but because of deliberate policy measures indulged in by this government, then you essentially find that domestic demand collapses and capacity utilization is not full, and as a result, you don't have any interest on the part of the private sector to invest. So this has nothing to do with partisan analysis. Any economist will tell you the economy was picking up and it's come down, and it still looks well dressed because of the new way of calculating these numbers. Otherwise, it's much, much worse than what it was when UPA left as well. So basically, what you are facing here is the end result of tremendous economic mismanagement.
Okay,
and all
fair enough.
the rhetoric of exhorting the private sector to go out there and invest will not cut any ice. And the last point about the ease of business rankings, the whole World Bank methodology has been criticized by its own chief economist, and so I would not give any credence to that anymore. India may have worsened as far as that the actual reality on that front is. We don't want that, but that may be the reality.
Rajiv Gowda calls it, GVL coming to you, GVL I'm coming to you, Rajiv Gowda calls it economic mismanagement. I'm going to let you comment with a rebuttal, but I want to add another point to it, because the reason we are debating private investment, the reason we are debating the investment cycle is because we believe that's the only way you can create jobs. Now GVL, I know, and we've debated on this channel a report that suggests that 7 million jobs have been created in 2018 based on EPFO data, based on payroll data that's been analyzed and debated. We'll come to that in a bit, but more importantly, the fact is that high quality jobs are not being created in the economy, and that's not something that we can dispute. Will you take that criticism on board, and will you agree that Budget 2018 needs to do whatever it can to ensure job creation gets an impetus?
No, I think job creation will always remain a priority area. But 7 million jobs created in the organized sector, how are they not quality jobs? I think it's very unfair to say if you are able to add so many to the organized sector, it's really we have been able to qualitatively improve the employment profile of our workforce. Certainly more needs to be done, I agree. But certainly to say that nothing has happened is absolute propaganda. And India, while the Congress leaders and wearing the hat of economists would want to really talk the economy down, the whole world is talking about India accelerating its economy. India being talked about as a bright spot. So obviously, who would people believe? A gloom and doom prophecy of Rahul Gandhi, for him GDP is gloom and doom prophecy. The intolerance debate, the bogey did not work. Therefore, now he wants to prophesize gloom and doom. That's not going to work. World is looking at India as a real growth story. World is seeing massive prospects for us in future. We certainly have our areas to be focused upon. We certainly have our challenges, but economy today is far better than what it was when the Congress was in power. Today you have inflation down around 3.3%, while your growth is well above 7% in the next year. Well, when you were in power, when the Congress was in power, the reverse was true.
All right.
The fiscal deficit is under control. All macroeconomic indicators are very, very positive. So this government certainly gets a superlative rating there. There are areas to improve upon, but that's not to say that we have not done exceptionally well.
How big an issue is jobs politically? I mean, is it an issue that's going to pinch, because the BJP has traditionally had a lot of sway with the urban electorate, but we haven't seen that vote bank being hit, at least in the assembly elections. Even in the state of Gujarat, for example, we've seen the urban voters still back the BJP despite the blow of demonetization. But how big do you think is jobs an issue politically for the government?
Job creation is a big issue, and I would say without doubt Modi has disappointed on this particular score. However, voters will have to ask themselves, will Congress do any better? Will Samajwadi Party do any better? Will the DMK do any better? There are fundamental, deep structural problems. If we have relatively high prices of land, labor and capital, which is the case, and we have an exchange rate which is not favorable either, how then do you get competitive? There are problems there, and all the parties, far from wanting to lower the cost of land or lower the cost of labor, would like to pass legislation which in fact increases it. Even this Modi government, which has talked about labor reforms and labor flexibility, is apparently, there is one bill under consideration to have a national minimum wage over and above the state minimum wages. So, you know, this does not seem to be a country where you are all out to lower the costs of these various things. So while yes, jobs are a problem, while yes, the BJP has not been successful, is anybody else coming out with a formula that will be more successful? I do not see it. All the others have been given a chance too. All of them have been in power in various states too. So while it is true that the Modi government is not doing well on jobs, while it is leading to agitations like that of Hardik Patel, of the Jats, of the Gujars, of the Ahoms, so, you know, a large number of people say you must have reservation. Does the Congress have a solution which the BJP does not? I don't see it, and I don't think voters will see that either.
You know, I really think you've hit the nail on its head, and I'm actually going to say something very controversial on the show this evening. Rajiv Gora, the question is coming your way. India's demographic dividend has been talked about externally, internally. We are the youngest nation in the world, or we are the most thriving. But as a policy maker, as somebody who's going to be in a seat of power one day or the other, whether it's you or the BJP, will you agree with me that for a policy maker, it is this demographic dividend that could be a nightmare? I mean, you know, Swami touched upon that briefly, that the kind of agitations that we have seen from dominant castes in this country, all are actually steep-rooted in jobs, in joblessness. Will you agree with me that as a policy maker, this demographic dividend is actually a nightmare to deal with? Because there aren't enough jobs being created, and there is very limited avenue to create so many more.
I think there are many opportunities to ensure that the demographic dividend actually turns out to be one, and that we avoid this nightmare scenario that you are projecting. When you talk about the agitations in rural India, that's partly related to the fact that agriculture is not providing the kind of results and rewards that it used to historically. That most of the communities that we're talking about are landed communities who are facing, so fixing agriculture, incomes of farmers, etc., will play a significant role in this, you know, sort of removing that tension to some extent. But there are other sectors, you know, for example, construction, and which has tremendous multiplier impacts. And there, of course, you know, ensuring better skilling, better, you know, what shall we say, a training of people who are in that sector could ensure much more in the nature of efficiency and again have very, very significant impacts across the board. Then if you look at some of the mistakes this government's made, another big sector is leather and exports of leather, etc. But for a variety of other ideological reasons, they have come up with measures which have actually made that sector, practically collapse. You've seen exports of leather, you see the same problem with textiles, etc. Huge job-oriented sectors which have actually turned the other way. And these are not a result of an inability to create jobs. These are a result of some ideological constraint coming in the way of allowing these sectors to flourish and to allow more employment and things of that sort. Then in every one of these sectors, there's much more that needs to be done in terms of skilling and value addition, use of technology. So there is absolutely still an opportunity for us to leapfrog somewhere, somehow, and address this demographic challenge. I would not give up for a second, and but basically, again, non-farm services and incomes that can be generated in rural India, the kinds of possibilities that can be created in ancillary areas, in healthcare, in education, in renewable energy, there is a lot that can be done through intelligent policy, and that's exactly what we would do if we had the opportunity, and I'm sure that we will have
rebuttal from GVL. Quick rebuttal from GVL.
Sandeep, you see, Congress has very many good economists. They write as they become good columnists, good consultants, but when it comes to delivery, they miserably fail. They were in power for 10 years. What did they do for employment? It was Rangarajan, I am quoting C. Rangarajan, who was chairperson of the economic advisory group of Dr. Manmohan Singh. It was a zero. It was employment without employment growth. Whatever growth happened, it was purely without employment. So you can become today consultants, and Chidambaram can write great columns, but when it comes to delivery, you are completely found to be wanting. Okay. This government has created 7 million jobs. When your service sector is growing at about 8 or more than 8%, service sector has the maximum elasticity of employment generation. Service sector. Then comes construction, manufacturing sector. Service sector is doing very well. So 7 million jobs are created in the organized sector. This is evidence-based data. You don't want to believe it. You want to latch onto it as yet another bogey, like intolerance bogey. 3-4 people killed in different parts of the country, shocking incidents of murder, and this becomes a narrative.
Okay, I don't want this to become a political tutu meme. Rajiv, what I'll come to you, but I want to cover another important point with Sadanand Dume, and this is something that worries me, and picking up from a point that Sadanand spoke a little while ago, which is...
Let me rebut there.
Okay, Rajiv, quick rebuttal from you, Rajiv, very quick.
Just a very simple one. On this EPFO data, if you want to look at that and take whatever Pulak and Samarkand have come up with, basically you have to go to do the same for UPA years. And that data, once it's released, it's not released, you will see that on the same calculation, you'll have 5 lakh, jobs, 5 crore jobs being created or something like that. So, if you want to use this metric, take it back, and measure, and then you will find that this zero growth, zero job issue would not, would not be valid at all. So that evidence has not yet come out.
Sadanand, you want to quickly add your voice to that last question that we put forward. Will the government be obliged to be seen as acting against the rich, and which is why fears of an estate tax or an LTCG on equities is perhaps being spoken about? That's at least the narrative that's being built.
I mean, you can see the obvious temptation of that. I think it would be a very big mistake. One of the successes of this government has in fact been the stock market doing quite well. That's one of their selling points as they go into 2019. And they really can't afford to junk that. So I can see the temptation, but I think it would be very foolish.
Okay, you can see the temptation. It will be very foolish. Markets are not going to like that. It's going to be a tough balancing act for sure to manage the aspirations of industry, markets, the farmer who is under a lot of stress, and of course the salaried middle class as well. It's never easy, but this year it's probably going to be particularly challenging as we head for elections in 2019. I'd like to thank this wonderful panel, Sadanand Dume, Swaminathan Iyer, Rajiv Gowda and GVL Narasimha Rao for joining in with their perspective on whether or not this is going to be the big election budget in the build-up to 2019. Supriya.
Indeed. I think the only way that Mr. Modi and Mr. Jaitley will perhaps be seeing the constituents of this budget will be an influential investor community, a very vocal middle class, and a suffering but a voting farming community. So that's really the big way that they'll be looking at this budget. We've brought to you the politics of this budget. Keep it with ET Now to understand and analyze what Budget 2018 means to each one of you, the viewers. We promise to get you the sharpest analysis and the best perspective. Thank you very, very much for being with us this evening.